The Great Hall of the United Species Council had never been so full. An Ambassador HFY of the Valkyrie hegemony stood at its center like a predator about to strike, his four golden eyes sweeping across the thousands of delegates who had gathered for this historic moment. 3,000 years was a long time to wait. But his people were patient, and now the patience would finally be rewarded behind him. A massive holographic display flickered to life, showing fleet after fleet of warships gathering at the edge of human space. And the assembled delegates gasped at the sheer scale of what they were seeing. 17 species had contributed to this armada, and together they had assembled over 40,000 vessels of war, each one bristling with weapons capable of cracking worlds. Scathron let the image speak for itself before he raised his clawed hand for silence. "Distinguished delegates," he began, his voice carrying to every corner of the vast chamber. 3 millennia ago, our ancestors made a mistake, and that mistake has haunted us ever since. He gestured toward the display, where a small cluster of moons orbited a gas giant in a system that had once belonged to a proud and defiant species. We showed mercy to the humans. The word hung in the air like poison, and several delegates shifted uncomfortably in their seats, remembering the stories their grandparents had told them about the brief and terrible war that had ended an age ago. The humans had been newcomers to the galactic stage, barely capable of traveling between stars when they had stumbled into the greatest conflict the galaxy had ever known. Valkyrie hegemony and the Thracian collective had been fighting each other for 10,000 years, and neither side had expected a third party to interfere. But the humans had not simply interfered, and they had not simply fought. They had nearly won. HFY remembered the archives, the recordings of human ships ramming Valkyrie dreadnoughts, of human soldiers fighting in conditions that should have killed them instantly, of human commanders making decisions so insane that they somehow worked in 11 years. The humans had lost their homeworld, their colonies, and nearly their entire civilization. But in those same 11 years, they had destroyed the sacred planet of the Valkyrie, killed the immortal god emperor of the Thracians, and brought 2 ancient empires to their knees. The Galactic Truce had been signed not out of generosity, but out of fear. We gave them one system, HFY continued. 3 small moons orbiting a gas giant. And we told ourselves that we were being merciful, that we were containing a threat, that we were wise. He laughed, and the sound was bitter. We were fools. The display changed, showing grainy surveillance footage of human settlements, primitive structures on barren moons where 12 billion humans supposedly lived out their quiet lives for 3,000 years. We have watched them, and for 3,000 years, they have done nothing, built nothing, achieved nothing. And we told ourselves that this was good, that they had learned their place. His 4 eyes narrowed. But something is wrong. And we all feel it, do we not? Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Because he was right. And everyone knew it. The humans were too quiet, too compliant, too accepting of their fate. Species that had been conquered and contained usually tried to rebel at least once every few centuries. But the humans had done nothing. They had simply existed, living their lives on their small moons, never complaining, never fighting, never asking for more. It was unnatural, and it made the older species nervous in ways they could not quite explain. "I have spent my entire career studying humanity," HFY said, "and I have come to a conclusion that my government now shares." He turned to face the full council, his voice rising. "The humans are hiding something, and whatever they are hiding, it threatens us all." The holographic display shifted one final time, showing the combined fleet in all its terrible glory. "The truce ends today, and tomorrow. We will finally learn what the humans have been doing for 3,000 years. And then we will end them, once and for all." The vote was unanimous. 17 species standing together against a common enemy. And when it was done, the delegates began to celebrate, congratulating each other on their wisdom and their strength. Nobody noticed a single human delegate sitting in the observation gallery above Commander. Yuki Tanaka was a small woman with dark hair and eyes that had seen too much. And she had watched the entire proceedings without saying a word. She was the only human permitted in council space, a symbolic ambassador to a galaxy that had never wanted her people to exist. Now she stood, and the movement caught Kethvorin's attention, and he looked up at her with triumph in his golden eyes. "Do you have anything to say?" "Human," he called out, and the hall fell silent. Every eye turning to watch her response, Tanaka looked down at the assembly, at the representatives of species that had tried to exterminate her people 3,000 years ago and were now preparing to try again. She thought about her ancestors, who had lost everything and refused to surrender. She thought about her parents, who had raised her in the deep places where alien eyes could not see. She thought about the billions of humans who had worked and planned and built for this exact moment, knowing it would come, preparing for it with patience. That would make the Valkyrie look impulsive, and then she smiled. It was not a smile of fear or desperation or resignation. It was the smile of someone who knew something that nobody else in the room even suspected. "Ambassador Kethvorin," she said, her voice clear and calm, "I want to thank you." The alien frowned, confusion replacing his triumph. "Thank me?" "Yes," Tanaka said, and her smile grew wider, "because my people have been waiting a very long time for this day, and we were starting to worry you would never come." She turned and walked toward the exit, and behind her, the greatest military alliance in galactic history watched her go. Kethvorin wanted to call out, to demand an explanation, to understand why a woman facing the extinction of her species would smile like that. But something stopped him. Something cold and ancient that whispered in the back of his mind, what if they were wrong about the humans? What if they had always been wrong? Shook off the feeling and turned back to his celebration, telling himself that tomorrow would bring victory. But that night, alone in his quarters, Ambassador Kethvorin dreamed of human faces smiling in the darkness, and he woke in a cold sweat without knowing why. Admiral Vormesh of the Thracian Collective stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Vengeance, and watched the stars blur as his fleet entered the human system. The ship was 3 kilometers long and carried enough firepower to destroy a small planet. And it was just one of 40,000 vessels that had come to end humanity once and for all. Behind him, his officers worked at their stations with quiet efficiency, and Vormesh allowed himself a moment of satisfaction at how smoothly the operation was proceeding. "All fleets report ready," Admiral, his tactical officer, announced. "The Valkyrie strike force has taken position on the far side of the system, and the auxiliary squadrons are moving to block any escape routes." Vormesh nodded, his massive armored head gleaming in the bridge lights. "What of the humans?" The tactical officer checked his displays and frowned. "Nothing, Admiral. No ships, no defensive platforms, no weapons signatures of any kind. And the settlements on the 3 moons appear unchanged. They are not even trying to run. It would appear not." "Sir," Vormesh rumbled with something that might have been laughter, "then they have finally accepted their fate. And this will be even easier than we thought." He had been a young officer during the First War, barely old enough to command a single vessel, and he remembered the terror that humanity had inspired in those days. Human ships had been primitive and poorly armed, but the creatures inside them had fought like nothing the galaxy had ever seen. They did not surrender. They did not retreat, and they did not die easily. One human destroyer had rammed his uncle's dreadnought and killed 10,000 Thracian warriors in a single moment of suicidal fury. That memory had stayed with Vormesh for 3,000 years, and he had spent his entire career preparing for this day. The day when humanity would finally be destroyed. "Take us in," he commanded, slow and steady. "And I want every sensor we have scanning for traps." The fleet began its advance into the human system. And for the first hour, nothing happened. The gas giant loomed ahead of them. A massive ball of swirling colors with 3 small moons orbiting in its shadow on those moons. According to every intelligence report, the galaxy had gathered over 3 millennia. Lived the entire human species, 12 billion people, confined to primitive settlements. Living under constant surveillance, it should have been impossible for them to hide anything. "Admiral," the sensor officer said suddenly, her voice uncertain. "I am detecting anomalies." Vormesh turned to face her. "What kind of anomalies?" "Gravitational fluctuations, sir. Very small but very strange, and they seem to be coming from the asteroid belt." "The asteroid belt is just rocks." "Yes, sir. That is what our records indicate. But these readings suggest otherwise." Vormesh frowned and moved to stand beside her, looking at the display that showed the scattered debris of ancient collisions stretching across the system. "Show me." The sensor officer adjusted her instruments, and the display zoomed in on a section of the belt. At first, Vormesh saw nothing unusual, just tumbling rocks in the eternal darkness. But then one of the rocks moved not the way an asteroid should move, drifting slowly through space, but deliberately with purpose, like a ship changing course. "That is not possible," Vormesh whispered. "Admiral," the sensor officer said, and her voice was shaking now. "I am reading artificial structures throughout the asteroid belt, thousands of them, each one larger than this flagship." The bridge fell silent. "That cannot be right," Vormesh said. But even as he spoke, the darkness was changing all across the asteroid belt. Objects that had looked like rocks for 3,000 years began to unfold. Massive constructs emerged from their disguises, revealing themselves to be weapons platforms and carrier vessels and things that Vormesh had no name for. They were everywhere. The tactical officer was the first to speak, his voice barely above a whisper. "Admiral, I am counting over 50,000 vessels, and more are appearing every second." "Contact the Valkyrie," Vormesh commanded. "Tell them we need." He stopped, because something else was happening behind the gas giant, where nothing should exist except empty space. A shadow was rising. It was a sphere, Vormesh realized slowly. A sphere of metal and energy so large that it had its own gravitational pull. "What is that?" someone asked. And nobody answered because nobody knew the human communication channels opened for the first time in 3,000 years. And a calm female voice filled the bridge. "Admiral Vormesh of the Thracian Collective. This is Commander Yuki Tanaka of the Human Defense Force. And I have a message for you, and for everyone who came here today." Vormesh could not speak, could not move, could only stare at the impossible armada that surrounded his fleet. "We have been expecting you," Tanaka continued. And Vormesh could hear the smile in her voice. "And we want to thank you for coming, because we have been waiting a very long time to show you what we have built." The massive sphere behind the gas giant began to glow. And Vormesh finally understood what it was: a weapon so large that it could destroy his entire fleet with a single shot. "You have 1 hour to surrender," Tanaka said. "And I suggest you use that time wisely, because in 1 hour, we are going to demonstrate exactly what humanity has been doing for the past 3,000 years." The communication channel closed, and Admiral Vormesh, conqueror of 100 worlds, commander of the greatest fleet in galactic history, felt something he had not felt since he was a young officer watching a human destroyer ram his uncle's ship. He felt afraid all around him. His officers were shouting, trying to organize a response, trying to understand what was happening, but Vormesh just stood there, staring at the display that showed his 40,000 ships surrounded by a force that made them look like toys. Humans had not been contained. They had not been defeated. They had been waiting. And now, the galaxy was about to learn what happened when humanity stopped pretending to be weak in the distance. The great sphere continued to glow. And Vormesh knew with terrible certainty that the war he had dreamed of winning for 3,000 years was already lost. Commander Yuki Tanaka stood in the command center of the Great Sphere, watching the alien fleet through sensors so advanced that she could see the fear on individual faces, aboard enemy ships behind her. Thousands of human officers worked at stations that controlled weapons and defenses and systems that the galaxy could not even imagine. This was the Prometheus station, humanity's greatest secret, and it had been built for exactly this moment. All defense platforms report ready, her second-in-command announced. The asteroid fortresses are in position, and the deep fleet is standing by. Tanaka nodded, but her mind was elsewhere, thinking about the history that had brought them to this day. 3,000 years ago, her ancestors had been refugees, survivors of a war that had cost them everything they love. The Earth was gone. Burned to ashes by Valkyrie plasma fire, Mars was gone. Cracked open by Thracian gravity bombs, the colonies were gone. 12 worlds erased from existence in a single decade of horror. When the Galactic Truce was signed, humanity had been given one system and told to be grateful. The galaxy expected them to fade away, to become a footnote in history, to accept their place as a defeated and broken species. The galaxy did not understand humans at all within a year of the truce. The survivors had begun to dig. They hollowed out the 3 moons from the inside, creating vast underground cities where billions could live in secret. They built habitats in the crushing atmosphere of the gas giant itself, learning to thrive in conditions that should have killed them instantly. They spread to every rock and asteroid and piece of debris in the system, building hidden bases that alien sensors could not detect. And they had children, so many children, because humanity understood something that the ancient empires had. Forgotten numbers mattered, technology mattered, but what mattered most was time. And humanity had decided to be patient. Commander, the communications officer said, the Valkyrie flagship is attempting to contact us. Put them through. Ambassador Kethvoran's face appeared on the main display, and Tanaka was pleased to see that his 4 golden eyes were wide with shock. This is impossible, he said. We have monitored your system for 3,000 years, and there was nothing, no ships, no weapons, no industry. You saw what we wanted you to see. Tanaka replied calmly. But how did you hide it? Where did you find the resources? Where did you find the people? Tanaka smiled, the same smile she had given him in the council chamber. Would you like to know the truth? Ambassador, Kethvoran nodded slowly, unable to speak. When the truce was signed, our population was approximately 2 billion survivors, and your intelligence services have spent 3 millennia telling you that we now number 12 billion. She paused, letting the moment stretch. The actual number is closer to 400 trillion. The color drained from Kethvoran's face, and somewhere behind him, Tanaka heard someone scream. That is not possible, the ambassador whispered. We live underground, Tanaka explained. We live in the gas giant. We live in asteroids and comets and stations hidden in the darkness between worlds. And for 3,000 years, we have been growing stronger while you grew complacent. She gestured at the display behind her, which showed a map of the human system that no alien had ever seen. Cities beneath the surface of moons, each one home to billions floating habitats in the clouds of the gas giant, harvesting energy and materials from the endless storms, a Dyson swarm around the system's sun, collecting more power than most civilizations used in a century, and ships, so many ships, hidden in every shadow, waiting for the day they would finally be needed. Your ancestors made a mistake, Tanaka continued. They thought that defeating us once meant defeating us forever. But they did not understand what we are. "And what are you?" Kethvorin asked, his voice hollow. "We are the species that learn to fall and get back up. And every time we fall, we come back stronger. And you should have killed us all when you had the chance, Ambassador. Because now you will never have that chance again." The hour passed quickly, and when it ended, the human fleet moved. It was not a battle, because a battle implies two sides with a chance of victory. This was a demonstration. Human ships appeared from nowhere, slipping through folds in space that the alien sensors could not even detect. Weapons fired that did not destroy enemy vessels, but simply made them stop existing. Folded into dimensions that had no name in the first minute. 1,000 alien ships vanished in the second minute. Another 1,000 followed by the fifth minute. The alien fleet was in full retreat. But there was nowhere to run because human vessels were everywhere, appearing and disappearing like ghosts. Admiral Vormesh watched his tactical display with empty eyes as ship after ship blinked out of existence. "They're not even trying to kill us," his tactical officer said, and his voice was filled with wonder and terror. "They are capturing us, taking our ships whole, and we cannot stop them." Vormesh finally understood what humanity had become. 3,000 years of hiding and building and planning. They had not just caught up to the galaxy, they had left it far behind. "Signal our surrender," he said quietly. "Admiral, signal our surrender," Vormesh repeated. "And pray that they are more merciful than we would have been." Across the system, 17 species laid down their arms, and humanity accepted their surrender with grace and patience, because this was not about revenge. And it had never been about revenge. This was about showing the galaxy that humanity was done hiding, done pretending, done accepting a place at the bottom. Commander Tanaka watched the alien fleets power down their weapons, and she felt no joy, no triumph, no satisfaction. She felt only relief. The waiting was finally over. Now the real work could begin. The war lasted 6 hours, and when it ended, the galaxy held its breath. Every species that had sent ships to destroy humanity was now waiting to learn their fate, expecting the same treatment they had planned to give the humans. Extinction. Admiral Vormesh sat in a holding cell aboard the Prometheus station, surrounded by guards who looked at him with expressions he could not read. They did not seem angry, which confused him because he had come to kill their families and burn their worlds if the situations were reversed. Vormesh knew exactly what his people would do to captured enemy commanders. They would make them suffer for years before finally allowing them to die. A door opened, and Commander Tanaka walked in, still wearing the same calm expression she had worn throughout the entire conflict. "Admiral," she said, nodding politely as if they were meeting at a diplomatic function instead of in the aftermath of a failed genocide. "Have you come to tell me how I will die?" Vormesh asked. Tanaka looked genuinely surprised by the question. "Why would we kill you? Because that is what we would have done to you." "Yes," Tanaka agreed. "I know, but we are not you, Admiral. And we never wanted to be." She sat down across from him, and for a long moment, neither of them spoke. "I have spent my entire life preparing for this day," Vormesh finally said. "And I thought I understood what would happen. But I do not understand any of this." "What do you not understand?" "Everything," the Admiral admitted. "You had us completely defeated, and you could have destroyed every ship in our fleet. But you did not. You captured them instead. And now you are sitting here talking to me like I am a guest instead of an enemy." Tanaka was quiet for a moment, considering her words carefully. "Do you know why humanity survived the first war?" "Admiral, because you fought like animals," Vormesh said. "Because you had no fear of death. Because you were willing to sacrifice everything." "No," Tanaka said softly. "We survived because we refused to become what you wanted us to become." She leaned forward, and her dark eyes were intense. "Your people and the Valkyrie spent 10,000 years trying to destroy each other. And in all that time, neither side ever stopped to ask why, and when we appeared, you both turned your weapons on us because that was the only thing you knew how to do. We were protecting ourselves. You were afraid. Tanaka corrected him. You saw something new and different, and instead of trying to understand it, you tried to destroy it, and when that failed, you locked us away and pretended we did not exist. Vormesh wanted to argue, but he could not find the words because she was right. For 3,000 years, Tanaka continued, we have been preparing for this moment, and for 3,000 years, we have been asking ourselves what we would do when it came. And what did you decide? We decided that we would not become you. She stood up and walked to the window, where the vast human fleet was visible against the stars. We could destroy your civilization, she said. We have the power to burn every Thracian world, to crack every Valkyrie planet, to end every species that came here today. Vormesh felt cold fear grip his hearts. But we will not do that, Tanaka said, turning back to face him, because that is not who we are, and it is not who we want to be. Then, what do you want? We want to give you a choice. The next day, the surviving leaders of the Allied fleet were brought before the Human Council, and Commander Tanaka addressed them with the same calm voice she had used throughout the conflict. You came here to destroy us, she began, and we have every right to destroy you in return. But we have decided to offer you something else instead. The display behind her showed images that made the alien leaders gasp human medical technology that could cure diseases their species had suffered from for millions of years. Human energy systems that could provide unlimited power to entire worlds, human agricultural techniques that could end hunger forever. Human ships that could travel between galaxies in months instead of millennia. For 3,000 years, we have been building, Tanaka said. But we have not just been building weapons, and we have been solving problems. Problems that your civilizations gave up on long ago. Ambassador Cathvoran raised his hand, and Tanaka nodded for him to speak. Why would you share this with us? He asked. We are your enemies. You were our enemies, Tanaka corrected him. But that was yesterday, and today. We are offering you a chance to be something else. What? Partners? The word hung in the air. And for a long moment, nobody spoke. You do not trust us, Cathvoran said slowly. You cannot trust us, not after what we tried to do. No, Tanaka agreed. We do not trust you, but trust can be built over time. And we are very patient. She smiled, and this time there was warmth in it. 3,000 years ago, you made us enemies, and today, we are offering you a chance to make us friends. But understand this, Ambassador. Her smile faded, replaced by something harder. You only get to make this choice once. And if you choose to remain our enemies, we will remember that. And we will act accordingly. The threat was clear. But so was the offer to join humanity as partners. Share in technologies that could change everything. Build a future together or face a species that had spent 3 millennia preparing for war and would not hesitate to finish what the galaxy had started. Ambassador Cathvoran looked at his fellow leaders, at the representatives of 17 species who had come here expecting easy victory. None of them had expected this. None of them had imagined that the humans they had dismissed as primitives would offer them a gift instead of a punishment. We need time to consider, Cathvoran said. You have 1 hour, Tanaka replied, and the warmth returned to her voice. But I think you will find that the choice is easier than you expect. She was right. 17 minutes later, the vote was unanimous. The galaxy chose friendship. 10 years passed, and the galaxy changed in ways that nobody could have predicted. Human medical technology spread to 1,000 worlds, eliminating diseases that had plagued species for millions of years. And the gratitude of those who were healed ran deeper than any old hatred. Human energy Systems ended scarcity on planets that had fought wars over resources for longer than humanity had existed. And former enemies found themselves working together to build something new. Human ships began, carrying crews from a dozen different species, heading toward distant stars and distant galaxies on voyages that would take generations, but that suddenly seemed possible. The old empires did not disappear, but they changed, softened by prosperity and hope, and the strange realization that cooperation could achieve more than conquest ever had. Ambassador Kethvoran walked through the corridors of a human space station that now orbited his homeworld. A gift from the species his people had once tried to destroy, the station was beautiful, filled with gardens and art and spaces designed to make visitors feel welcome. And Kethvoran still found it hard to believe that it existed. He found Commander Tanaka in an observation lounge, looking out at the stars with an expression he had learned to recognize as contentment. "Ambassador," she said, nodding in greeting, "I was hoping you would come." "I had to see it for myself," Kethvoran admitted. "The first ship is leaving today." They both turned to watch as a massive vessel moved away from the station, its hull gleaming with technologies that had not existed a decade ago. The ship was called the New Dawn, and it carried 10,000 passengers from 12 different species. Its destination was the Andromeda Galaxy, and the journey would take 50 years. But the crew had volunteered eagerly because they believed in what they were doing. "My grandfather tried to kill your species," Kethvoran said quietly, "and now your species is sending mine to explore another galaxy." "That was 3,000 years ago," Tanaka replied. "And a lot has changed since then." "I know, but I still do not understand why you forgave us." Tanaka was quiet for a long moment, watching the New Dawn accelerate toward the edge of the system. "We did not forgive you," she finally said. "Forgiveness implies that we forgot what happened, and we will never forget." Kethvoran turned to look at her, confused. "Then why did you help us?" "Because holding on to anger would have destroyed us," Tanaka explained. "And we decided a long time ago that we would not let our enemies define who we are." She turned to face him, and her dark eyes were serious. "You see, Ambassador, you made a mistake 3,000 years ago, and it was not trying to destroy us. What was it? You saw our capacity for war and assumed that was what defined us. But it is not." She gestured at the observation window, at the ship carrying passengers from species that had been killing each other for millennia. "War is what we do when we have no choice, when our backs are against the wall and our survival is at stake. And yes, we are very good at it, but it is not who we are." "And who are you?" Tanaka smiled. And it was the same smile she had given him in the council chamber all those years ago. But now Kethvoran understood it. It was not a smile of triumph or defiance. It was a smile of hope. "We are builders," she said. "We are dreamers. We are the species that looks at the impossible and asks how we can make it possible. And that is what we have been doing for 3,000 years. She pointed at the New Dawn, now a small bright dot against the endless darkness. "That ship carries the future of the galaxy, and it exists because we refuse to become the monsters you expected us to be." Kethvoran considered this, thinking about his own people and their long history of war and conquest. The Velkari had spent millions of years dominating others because they feared being dominated themselves. And the Thracians had done the same. And every species in the galaxy had assumed that power meant control and survival, meant supremacy. Humanity had been pushed to the very edge of extinction, had lost everything they loved, had been given every reason to become the most terrible predators the universe had ever seen. Instead, they had become something else. "We called you primitives," Kethvoran admitted. "We thought we were the pinnacle of civilization," Tanaka laughed. And it was a warm sound without any mockery. "Give it a few centuries, Ambassador, and you will catch up." She placed a hand on his arm. A gesture of friendship that would have been unthinkable a decade ago. "We will help." They stood together in silence, watching as more ships began to gather near the new dawn. Vessels from every corner of the galaxy joining the great expedition somewhere in that fleet. Kethvor knew his own grandchildren were preparing for the journey. Young Valkyrie who had grown up in a galaxy where humans were allies instead of enemies. They would never know the fear that their ancestors had felt. And they would never understand the hatred that had nearly destroyed two civilizations. They would only know the future. And that future was bright. "Commander," Kethvorn said, "I have one more question. Yes, when you smiled at me in the council chamber before the war, what were you thinking?" Tanaka looked at him with eyes that had seen the worst of what the galaxy could do, and had chosen to believe in something better. "I was thinking about this moment," she said. "About standing here with you, watching our children fly toward the stars together." She turned back to the window, and her smile grew wider. "I was thinking about how good it would feel to prove everyone wrong." The New Dawn and its escort fleet reached the edge of the system and engaged their drives, disappearing in a flash of light that would carry them across the void between galaxies. In that moment, watching a dream become reality, Ambassador Kethvorn finally understood what humanity truly was. They were not conquerors or destroyers or the monsters the galaxy had feared. They were the species that refused to give up, that fell down and got back up, that turned enemies into friends and nightmares into dreams. They were hope. And now, for the first time in history, the entire